And so we move now to our reading. We're journeying through the great Gospel of Mark. We've already seen the beginning of it, the calling of the good news out. Here is the good news. We've seen the calling of the first disciples. We've seen a demon suddenly appear in the middle of the synagogue. We've seen Peter's mother healed and Jesus go off to pray. Now we move on to a man with leprosy. Came to him and begged him on his knees, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." Jesus was indignant. He reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said, "be clean." Immediately the leprosy left him and he was cleansed. Jesus sent him away at once with a strong warning. "See that you don't tell this to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest and offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded for your cleansing as a testimony to them." Instead, he went out and began to talk freely, spreading the news. As a result, Jesus could no longer enter a town openly, but stayed outside in lonely places. Yet the people still came to him from everywhere. It's another interesting story of healing. And I brought this book that I'd just like to read from the beginning, because over the last few weeks, we've looked at Jesus doing things. Healing, raising up a sick woman, dealing with a demon-possessed man. Now, this book says, from the scripture, many of Christ's contemporaries, the principal question that was raised by his ministry concerned the power with which he acted and the authority by which he spoke. Not, that is, whether his power and authority were real, but what was their source. So they didn't have a question or a concern that what Jesus was doing was what Jesus was doing. The question was, from what source did it spring? And in the ancient world of the Jews, this was crucial. And we'll come to this in a moment, because it's why he tells the leprosy gentleman that he's healed to go and show himself to the priests. What source is it? And then later on you will hear arguments, major arguments, all through the scripture. This is the main source. And we can have it ourselves. The only thing I could think of that comes close is when Donald Trump shouted, "Stop the steal." And many in America believe that Joe Biden is illegitimate. Do you remember when many said that Barack Obama could not be president because he wasn't born in the United States? So the insinuation there was his authority was fake and false, and it did not belong to him. So therefore, if he ordered the troops as commander-in-chief into battle, he had no right to do so. For where does the source flow? It flows from the people who vote for a legitimate candidate. So it's here, the same thing. And later, in the scriptures, they will say that Jesus' source of authority is actually the devil himself. And then everything changes. Jesus begins to withdraw. But here he meets this leper, and it comes to him and he begs him on his knees. He's got nowhere else to go. There's nowhere left. Leprosy, because we support the leprosy mission, is a horrible disease. And it was contagious back then. And it meant you were shunned. You had no place with your people. No one would come to you. You had no right to the temple or its ministrations. It was, if I may, a permanent lockdown. You had nowhere to go. You were under house arrest at all times. You had to go around shouting unclean as you came, in case people thought he hasn't got a mask, he's very contagious, I'm gone. And you would run away. So this is a desperate man. And it says, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." And I love this. It doesn't say Jesus went, "Oh." It said he was indignant. He uses the same word when the disciples tried to take the children away and say, "Go away, don't come to him." He's indignant. It means it's furiously angry. And what's he furiously angry at? As you find with Jesus Christ everywhere, the effects of sin. What sin does. What happens in a world where some are told, "Well, you're not in, you can go over there." And he says, "I am willing." And in the Greek, it's really quite powerful. It's not, "Oh, go on then." It's, I am willing. I want to make you clean. And he does. So again, you're back to, well, where does his power come from? What's the source? That's why he says this. Go and show yourselves to the priest. Go and make the sacrifice of Moses. Because the priests were legally obliged to take this man and say, "How were you healed?" He would then have to tell them. They would have to investigate. And that would leave them with a problem. Who was the figure that healed them? Come with me to John, and you've got an even worse example of this. This is the man born blind. Jesus puts mud on his eyes. Remember the story? Sends him down into the lake, and bit by bit he can see. But he doesn't know who Jesus is because remember, he's blind, but he's healed. But this man was blind from birth. Now, in the ancient world, it was accepted by the Jewish people that there were healers who could heal blindness. Not from birth, they couldn't. Because the belief was, whatever we think of it, and I begged you at the start of Mark, please don't judge them by our standards. Don't dismiss them as superstitious idiots that knew nothing. They did. They knew full well what an illness was. Like I said, they knew leprosy, they knew bleeding, they knew what all kinds of diseases were. Not everything was a demon possession. So they knew what demonic possession was when they saw it, but they didn't see it everywhere. They knew illnesses. Not all things were spiritual forces. They knew all this. These were clever people. Otherwise, they couldn't have built half the things they built. But in their understanding, if you were born blind, it was because somehow or other, the mother that bore you had sinned. And so you were born blind. So the only person that could heal that blindness in the Jewish understanding in their scripture was the Messiah himself. Nobody else. And that's exactly what Jesus does with this man. He heals him. Then it says, they brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. Now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was a Sabbath. Therefore the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. He put mud on my eyes, and I washed, and now I see. Some of the Pharisees replied, this man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. There you go. But but others asked, how can a sinner perform such signs? So they were divided. Then he turned again to the blind man. What have you to say? It was your eyes he opened. The man replied, I think he is a prophet. They still did not believe that he had been born blind and received his sight until they had seen the man's parents. I want the rest of the story. They come in and they start to question the parents, who basically say, oh, this is scary. I could be in trouble. Ask him. They throw the son under the bus, in our phrase. Nothing to do with me. Leave me alone. Because you see what's going on? There is a major battle going on here. They were divided. How were you healed? On what power was it that healed you? Same with the leper. So when they go, this is what should happen. And they should look and see how was he healed. And then slowly they are presented with a conundrum. Who is this Jew from Nazareth who's going around doing all this? Because if he's not of the devil, then God is at work here, which is what you get later on when one of them says, if this is of God, it will work. If it is not, it will die. Leave it alone. But they won't have it. They won't have that he is the Messiah because of this. He broke the Sabbath. Remember it says this is authority, but not like the others, because he didn't go around like an essay quoting number one. Then at the bottom you put, I don't know, the name of the author and the book and the page number. And that's what you had to do. This rabbi said, that rabbi said, Rabbi Gamaliel taught this, Rabbi Thingy taught that, Rabbi Ben Joseph. No, he just taught. And they said it was powerful. There was something about him. But they weren't having Jesus simply because, that's why he says, go and show the law of Moses. He kept the law of Moses. Every single thing that Moses required, Jesus did. What he didn't do is keep the law of the rabbis. This is why they're divided over him. But go and show yourself, he says. And obviously we don't know what happens because he doesn't go. He should go. But he's so concerned with, look at me, look at me, look at me, here I am. But the whole point of Jesus' healing there was so that the rabbi, the leaders of Israel, would see what was going on. Their eyes would be forced to investigate. And as you've heard me quote before, what did Sherlock Holmes say? Once you've dismissed the impossible, whatever's left, however improbable, has got to be the truth. That's where they should have gone. But in their own mind, they couldn't go there. They were not prepared to go there. This was an imposter. This was a false prophet. He is still referred to in many Orthodox congregations as that man. They will not say his name. Some still curse the followers of the way and him. He is still seen as a great false prophet and a danger to the existence of Jewish faith. Because they won't have a bar of him because they've been taught, that he didn't fulfill the law. Where this is trying to prove that's exactly what he did. That the source of his healing, the source of driving out the demon, the source of picking up Peter's mother, the source of this man was that God's power was at work. That the kingdom they'd longed for had come. And now we're just going to go round the roundabout, aren't we? Because the kingdom they wanted was political. His was a kingdom not of this world. They wanted war. When he wants to become king, he walks away. How's his kingdom going to come in? Well, it's not going to come in through horse, through power, through sword. It's going to come through his spirit. through his teaching, ultimately through his death. But right now, that's, like I keep saying, it's a problem with Mark. You jump too far ahead because the whole thing is a great overarching thing with the cross always looming in the background. But here, these are the people that are seeing it. And like the blind man, he wants to know what's going on. I've been healed. This is the Messiah. You see it, the woman who touches his hem. Power's gone out from it. Oh, your daughter faith has made you well. All the way through, you see it. That he's doing things that Scripture, that the rabbis knew, would have told them only the promised Messiah could do. But they refused to see it because the Scripture says they were a stubborn-necked people. And they wouldn't see it. And they couldn't see it. And then when they turn to him at one point in the gospel and say, you are in league with Beelzebub. The devil is your source of authority. So come back to me with America when they're investigating it. You know, did Donald nick things? Did he stir it up? So they're basically, what they're trying to get him to is a point where they can say he cannot run for office anymore. He has declared himself an illegitimate candidate for president of the United States by his behavior. The same thing here. This cannot be that man. It cannot be. It doesn't fit. He is illegitimate. You cannot follow him. And so the rabbis and the Pharisees fan out and make sure this is exactly what all the villagers see. That it's not true. Where is his source of authority? Well, if it's not from God, it must be from the enemy. And those are the two choices. Hence this being born blind. And look at how utterly fractious they are. They can't answer it. They don't answer it. They can't when they've got him, when they've arrested him. It's the same thing. Jesus divides for those who say that his authority is from God or whether it is not from God. Let me read this again. In the Gospels, Christ's enemies seldom doubt that he is able to work wonders, heal the sick, give sight to the blind, there we go, make the lame well, perform and so forth. But they, again, look at, I can't see it, sorry, I ain't giving me my glasses. The print before was massive, this is really tiny. But it's saying the same thing. They are arguing about the origin of Jesus' authority. Let me repeat, please. They're not saying that what he was doing was fake, that his miracles weren't real, that the demonic possession and the removal of the demon wasn't real. They were saying, how do you do this? And most of the leaders of Israel who should have known came to the conclusion it was from the devil or Beelzebub or whatever other name you want to give it, that he was acting. But of course, we say very differently, that he did it because he was the Son of God, who'd come into this world to proclaim the good news, that the captives would be set free, that the lepers who had been cast aside for many, many years in him would be brought near, that they would be part of the commonwealth of Israel, that they could come and pray, that they could come to that temple. Remember when Jesus comes and he's indignant again when he sees the money changers and he says, you've turned my father's house that should have been a house of prayer into a den of thieves? Same thing. He's indignant at what's going on, at what religion ought to be and what it's been turned into by those that can make money from it. So let me ask then, as we go through Mark, what is the authority that Jesus has and where does it come from? Again, as I finish, he doesn't heal everybody. He doesn't. He doesn't answer every prayer of every crying person who comes to him. There are many, many more we hear nothing of. We're just told of those that he does heal. And why does he do it? He does it so the world would know that all that they had waited for had arrived in him. And all they had to do was see, look, and read their own scripture. And they would have no alternative to say, whatever's impossible, hang on a second, well, it can't be, it's improbable. But therefore it is the truth. And they should have hailed him as Messiah and Lord, but they don't. And I'll stop there. And as we go through the Gospel of Mark, we're going to see it more and more as the conflict rages, as the Pharisees and Sadducees no longer treat this man as just a prophet, just someone, who teaches. No, they begin to see him as someone extremely dangerous and someone that must be got rid of, must be stopped, if I can use the silly analogy, from ever standing in for office again. The people must be persuaded that he is false and fake. And ultimately, the only way they can do that is to have him crucified on a Roman tree and call him a political agitator. And then, which we've heard for 2,000 years, a failed Messiah. How can you worship a man on a tree? That's what I said this morning, the age-old argument. He's failed, but we sing that song, when Jesus' mission failed, but then we have the resurrection, and we'll come to that. So our next song